Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean for Graduate Programs, here with your fantabulous host, Ben Wiggin.
Welcome to May's MasterCast. How's it going, Shannon?
It's good. We had to redo that because I got so excited for my adjective. I messed up my words, but I was pretty pumped about fantabulous.
Fantabulous is a good word. I appreciate you applying it to me.
Thank you. Ryan said it this weekend, and then I started singing Moon Dance by Van Morrison because he says it in there. And so it's been in my head all weekend. And then I thought, that's the adjective for Ben.
It's a fantabulous day in Aggieland today.
It is. It's a beautiful day. It was a beautiful weekend. Guess what I did this weekend?
Wakeboarded.
Yeah.
Did you?
It was so fun.
Where did you go? Did you go to Bear X?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I can still feel my hands.
Good.
So far.
That's good.
Yeah. I don't want to speak too soon, but I didn't get hurt at all.
I like that.
But I took it a little easy. It's a rare occasion that I don't get hurt on the wakeboard. But I took it a little bit easy.
Yeah.
I decided I wasn't going to show off too much.
Yes.
I was just going to ease into it because it was my first time back for the season. So I was just going to ease into it. And then Ryan surprised me. So our townhouse, we're still not in our house. And the townhouse we're living in is a mile from Bear X.
Yeah.
And so I walked there because the water smells really bad when it gets in my car.
Uh-huh.
But I walked there and then I was going to walk back, and Ryan surprised me and showed up with the dogs and just stood outside the fence to watch. And so he was like, "Hey, are you doing one more run? Because I want to watch." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I thought, "Oh, I'll show off." And then I was like, "No, I'm tired. I better." Even if Ryan's here, I don't think he wants to watch me get injured. So I practiced some self-control. I'm pretty proud of myself.
We've talked about this before, but what is your most common wakeboarding injury?
I mean, I just get a lot of bruises for the most part, like hitting one of the features and then getting bruised from that. Or, I mean, mostly just as I've aged, my hands they've just gone numb from like carpal tunnel. And then there's another nerve that has some inflammation on the far side of my hand. So I don't know. That one's just weird. But usually just hitting the water too hard and then something gets bruised, or hitting a feature, which is actually a hard object in the water. So that's understandable why you would get bruised that way. But it's always something different. Like I might fall. So there's one of the features is called a kicker, and because it kicks you high up in the air. And so if you get off balance, especially if you're tired and like your arms aren't really tight and your core is not really tight, then you're going to fly in the air in a funny way and then just kind of belly flop. So one time it was my hip, just because it hit the water funny. You just never know.
We call our baby a kicker, but for different reasons. She likes to kick us in the face.
Well, I'll take her wakeboarding someday and see how she does.
Indeed.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Okay. On the show today, what did you do this weekend? Let me ask that first.
What did I do this weekend? We had a social distancing hamburger cookout over at my mom's place. I mean, there was just the five of us two, Brielle, and my mom and stepdad, Mark. Good bull to them for some delicious hamburgers. And Saturday, I had the tableau session with.
Oh yeah, how'd that go?
It went well. It went well. It's a little challenging doing that remotely and trying to juggle windows and so forth, but seemed like it went well.
Yeah, I did an Excel workshop for the same thing. We're doing these for mostly prospective students, but anybody in the community that wants to participate. They're just professional development workshops that we do throughout the course of the year. They're a couple of hours usually on a Saturday. We've done some on a Wednesday night before, just depending on. So if you're interested, if you want to learn more about Tableau or Excel, they're on our website. But I did one on Excel remotely about a month ago, and it was really difficult because unlike when you're in the room, you can't see if the students are keeping up or not. And I imagine it's the same with Tableau. It's not, you're not doing a presentation where you're just talking to someone for a couple of hours. You're trying to have them do what you're doing and keep up. And it's hard to know if they are or not. And some participants won't speak up, others will. So it just depends. But I thought that was an added element of trickery going on there. All right.
Indeed.
On today's show, we have Victoria Fernandez. Some of you may recognize her from her frequent appearances on CNBC, Bloomberg, and other news shows. To us, she is a former student from the MBA program, the Executive MBA program in Houston. Victoria currently serves as the Chief Market Strategist for Crossmark Global Investments. Before joining Crossmark, she spent 18 years with another firm where she worked her way from associate, actually from a high school intern, we'll hear on the show, to Municipal Portfolio Manager and a head trader for the fixed income division. She earned her undergraduate degree from Rice and then realized the error of her ways and came over to Texas A&M.
It's a familiar story.
For her MBA. And she lives in Houston with her family and works in several philanthropic organizations that we'll hear about on the show. We hope you enjoy the conversation with Victoria. She talks a lot about the market and pre and post COVID.
Let's get into it. We welcome Victoria Fernandez to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Did you have a nice weekend?
I did have a good weekend. I mean, we have limited activities we can do these days, but, took the dog for a walk, watched some movies, so it's all good.
Yes. What is your favorite superpower?
I think I'm going to have to say it would be invisibility. How people always talk about, I wish I could be a fly on the wall for certain conversations. So I think I would love to have that power, listen in on things that normally I wouldn't be able to, or, get work done without people knowing you're there so they can't come in and bother you. I think invisibility would be a pretty cool superpower.
I love that answer. Give us 60 seconds on your road to Maze.
And my road to Maze was actually quite long. I mean, I went into Maze 20 years after I graduated with my undergrad from Rice. So, in that time period, I started a family, I started a career, and it was just at that point in time when I felt like my kids are old enough that they can be self-sufficient somewhat, because I knew it was going to take a lot of hours of my time, a lot of my evenings and weekends. So it was always in the back of my mind, something I wanted to do. It took about 20 years to get there. And, timing always works out the way it's supposed to. I was with a great group of people. I can't imagine doing it with anyone else. So it was good.
I'm glad it worked out in a favorable way for you. Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up here in Houston, born and raised in Houston, went to Rice, did my undergrad at Rice, so stayed here for school. And then, obviously Maze has the city center location here in Houston. And so did my MBA there. So I'm just, I'm a Houston girl through and through.
What part of the city did you grow up in?
I actually grew up kind of in the Sharpstown area, lived there my whole life. Now I live more kind of in the Memorial City area. But yeah, I love the city. There's so much diversity here. There's so much stuff to do. It's a great town.
That is definitely true. How many in your family growing up?
Actually, it was just me, and I was raised by my grandmother. So it was just the two of us. It was a different kind of family dynamic. But our immediate household was just the two of us. So we had a very special bond, very special relationship. And it was good.
What was your first job?
So it's interesting that my first job was actually after my junior year of high school, and I interned at the investment firm that I eventually went to work for. So it wasn't a typical first job, but they took in students every summer to work for the summer to do certain projects for them. And I had a family friend that worked there, and she got me in, and it kind of laid the groundwork, I guess, for the rest of my career.
It sounds like it. And when you went back later, was she still there? How did that all play out?
Yeah, actually, she was still there. So it was interesting. Like I said, I went to do an internship there, and obviously very different experiences from when I went back later. I mean, you put six high schoolers in like this warehouse kind of room, and we would shred old files that they didn't need anymore. Or this kind of tells my age, but we would prep files to be microfilmed, and so that's how we used to store things, right? So you lock us all up in a room for 8 hours a day, and there's all sorts of craziness that goes on. But actually, my path was going to be different. I was going to go to medical school, and that was the plan. And I ended up working for a family practice doctor, actually my own family practice doctor, my senior year at Rice, and realized that maybe was not the path that I wanted to take. So I graduated from Rice and didn't really know what I was going to do. So I called the investment firm back up and said, hey, I just graduated and I don't have a job right now. So they actually had someone in their fixed income area that was going to go on maternity leave. And they said, please come fill in for her while she's out. It's like, perfect. So that was 3 months. And then when she came back, someone else in the firm was going to have back surgery. They were going to be out for a couple months. So they're like, can you stay a little bit longer? And next thing I know, I was there 18 years. So it just it developed. Sometimes I guess things are just meant to be and they work out.
Definitely. Any funny stories from the internship?
Well, like I said, it was just a bunch of teenagers. The firm had 3 floors in an office building. So most of the, what I will call permanent employees, the grown-up employees, worked on 2 floors. And then the 3rd floor was kind of storage. And that's where we all went. That's where all the shredding machines were and things like that. So 8 hours a day in there, you get kind of bored shredding and microfilming. So we all accidentally locked ourselves in the building stairwell one day. And it wasn't until someone on one of the other floors was like, has anyone seen the interns, today? No. And they came and found us and let us out. There were multiple ties on the guys that got shredded, from leaning over the shredder too far. There's no telling if you go back and pull those files, what's been microfilmed in there inadvertently. There's just no telling. So, but it was a lot of fun.
I'm sure it was. It sounds like it was a lot of fun. What was your greatest challenge as a child?
It's really an interesting question, because I look back and, I told you I was raised by my grandmother. It was just kind of the two of us. And I don't really look back and say I had these challenges that I had to overcome. At least at the time, I didn't think they were. We were not a wealthy family by any stretch of the imagination, but I never wanted for anything. Somehow, on a very small salary, she always made it work. I ended up getting a scholarship to go to a great high school in Houston. And so I guess I just never felt like I had challenges I had to overcome. I may not have had all the same things as other people, but I felt really blessed. So I'm not going to say I had to really overcome specific challenges, even though my family life was different and things were, not a typical family dynamic. I think I was pretty blessed.
You said your grandmother had a small salary. What did she do?
So she actually was a bookkeeper for a chain of liquor stores. It was interesting. The office, this was run by an individual. It was a private company who had a chain of liquor stores, and he and his wife had this great home kind of out by University of Houston, and they had a huge 3-car garage, and they converted that into the office. So my mom would go every day there and, hang out. It was just her and her boss, and they ran the business there. And so, I always got dragged along on any school holidays or summers or whatever and put to work doing something or other there. Maybe that's where my love of numbers came from at an early age. But she was an accounting bookkeeper. That was her position.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that history with us. Let's fast forward to today. You're at Crossmark Global Investments. What is Crossmark doing differently than other investment management shops? And let's hold aside COVID-19. We'll talk about that momentarily. But just broadly, given the competitiveness of the investment community, where does your team normally find its competitive advantage?
Yeah, we're a small boutique shop, right? We have about 50 employees. We have around $5 billion in assets under management. So, you look at us and you compare us to some of the huge conglomerates that are out there. And I think our competitive advantage, what we've heard our clients say is when they need to speak to someone, when there's a client who wants to know what's going on in their portfolio, they call and they talk to me, their actual portfolio manager. We stress the importance of building those relationships with our clients, knowing who they are, knowing what their situation is, and being there for them. I mean, it's a very personal journey for me when someone entrusts me with managing their money. They're not just another number on a page. It's something that I take very personally, and all of us here do that. So I think the relationship building, the personable aspect that we can give to people that other really large firms are not able to do, I think that's a competitive advantage for us. And in addition, we actually allow clients to apply a socially responsible screen to their investments. So for many clients, getting the return they need is not the only important thing to them. It's also important where that return comes from, what names are in their portfolios. And so we work with them one-on-one to customize their portfolios to do that. And that's something that not a lot of people will sit down and do with their clients. So combine all that together, and I think that's where our competitive advantage comes from.
How do you screen for CSR? What filters are you using to give your clients a look at social responsibility?
So it really comes from the client themselves, right? We're not putting our values on the portfolio. It comes directly from them. So say they don't want, you think of what they call the typical sin stocks, right? So alcohol, tobacco, gambling, those types of things. You can screen those names out that we would normally have in a portfolio. I think it's important for people to know that none of that really works if you don't have a strong portfolio to begin with. So that is always there for our clients. Whether they want screening or not, the strong portfolio is there. If they want that, then we can go on and we have third-party sources that we work with. We have our own internal research team. We screen the companies for worst offenders of certain things. They are rated on a scale by different companies like MSCI on where they stand on different issues. And so we use that component and rate these companies and determine who we want to include in a screen and who we don't.
What were you most excited about related to the market pre-COVID that might still be relevant as we recover?
Well, I think excited might not be the right terminology for kind of the way we were feeling before COVID. We were looking at where the market was trending. We hit market highs, right, back in February. And I think our team, our investment policy team, kind of sat around the table at our February meeting and we thought, things are running really fast here. We would anticipate we're going to have some kind of a slowdown. We're going to need a little bit of a pullback. We thought we'd kind of gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit on the equity markets. We didn't know what that trigger was going to be, and we certainly did not expect that it would be something to the extent of COVID-19, but we did expect to have a little pullback. So I wouldn't say that we were excited at where the market was. I would say we were cautious in January and February on what the market was doing. We did think, over a long term, the trend would be higher, but we expected some pullbacks. What I think we were most surprised about is on the fixed income side of the markets. We really had seen a trend at the end of last year, September, October, November, December. Rates were continuing to move a little bit higher, and we thought we would continue to see that. And boy, did that pull back quick at the end of February and beginning of March. And so I think that was probably our greatest surprise before COVID-19 hit.
Yes. What metrics do you look at most to evaluate the overall state of the market? I mean, Shiller's CAPE is obviously a popular one. Some people use Tobin's Q. Buffett has his own metric. Right. What do you normally look at?
So we are longer term investors, right? We're not in there daily trying to make trades on what's happening each day. We take that longer term outlook, and we do both a bottom up and a top down analysis of the markets to kind of put our outlook in place. So typically we would say, let's look at some of the fundamentals that are out there. Let's look and see what ISMs and PMIs are doing, both in the US and globally. Let's look and see where earnings projections are based on what expectations were. Let's look and see what the labor market's doing, what savings rate is going on. All of these types of numbers feed into some of the things that you're talking about, putting numbers in formulas and figuring out where they are on this trend line. But I think when COVID-19 hit, something we always tell our clients is ignore the headlines, look through the headlines and focus longer term. We actually have to kind of do the opposite now. And it's a shift in the way that we're thinking about the market. So factors that we would normally look at, factors that we would normally weigh quite heavily to help us give an outlook, we've had to put those aside because you can't really take what we're seeing now and extrapolate that out over the next couple of quarters. Instead, we're looking at things like traffic volume. We're looking at pollution numbers that you're saying. You're looking at how many people are wearing masks, because that's going to tell you if you think you're going to get a resurgence of COVID-19. There's all these types of things. The Apple app that tells you, like directions and stuff of where you're going, that is one of the most watched signals right now. Who would have thought that a couple months ago, that that's going to be your signal on what the economy is doing? So it's completely shifted to the mindset of what you're looking at. Typically, when we would look at things like you spoke about, the CAPE number, Tobin's Q, those are not things we're looking at now because we don't think it's giving us the information we need on what's going to happen over the near term.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because, price earnings are going to be all out of whack with earnings having taken this big hit.
Right.
What do you think is there, you mentioned that a lot of your methodology has kind of been reversed in terms of looking through the headlines and so forth. Do you think there is any historical comparable for current market conditions? Is there anything that you look at in history that you find helpful at all right now?
I don't think there's really a good correlation right now with any other time period. If you want to say, where did we see these big drops like this where we had people react in the same manner, you have to go back to the 20s or the 30s, but it's a very different situation. The cause of what we're in, being this health crisis and how it developed into a financial issue, is very different than what we've seen in the past. And so it's hard to take something, if you want to look back at 08 or 09, we didn't have a bubble that popped. We didn't have mortgages that were given that shouldn't have been, and that caused, chaos within the mortgage and the housing market. We're not having things like that. And so how we're going to come out of it, which is the big question, right? We know we had the big hit. Everyone's trying to figure out, how do we come out of this? I don't think we have a time period we can look back and say, when was the economy completely shut down by order of the government, by order of the states and the municipalities, and
right.
when did that start to get better? We don't have a comparison to that, which I think is why you're seeing so much volatility in the markets right now. People just don't know.
Right. It does seem that a set of expectations is developing, even if it has sort of a broad range of outcomes baked into it. What do you think people are most wrong about right now? Like, one example could be, I think airlines are going to do well long term. Most people do not. If you look at stock prices, most people think at least one airline is going to go bankrupt. And I'm not sure they're wrong about that part of it. But I do think that I disagree with Warren Buffett. And I think that long-term airlines are undervalued right now. Do you think that there's something the market is wrong about right now?
Well, I think the market I think it's looking at things in the wrong light, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
I think the market is looking at things right now on a here and now basis on what to invest in. They're like, okay, what's happening with COVID-19? So it goes to your point. Airlines are getting hit. Let's not buy airlines, right? Cruise lines are getting hit. Forget it. Cruise lines are done. You've got to take that longer term view that I was talking about earlier. And in that sense, I think you're absolutely right. In the longer term, are people going to fly again? Absolutely they are. We see pictures now of packed airplanes, right? And we think no one's flying. It's definitely much less than what we saw a few months ago, but it's starting to come back a little bit. Cruise ships may be a little bit different. I mean, people do kind of consider them as, floating germ petri dishes. So maybe there's a little bit of a different look on that industry. But again, there's things that I think have taken a hit that are going to come back. I hear a lot of people selling Disney because the parks are closed. Well, guess what? The parks are going to open. And where are families going to go with their kids as soon as the parks open? Right back to Disney. So companies are going to have lost revenue. That's a given. I don't think you take what's happening to them right now and make that your long-term investment plan. I mean, we see things in the cloud space. We see things where data-driven types of companies, cell towers, things like that, because there's going to be much more demand, I think, going forward as people continue to work from home, that is going to play into those stories. So don't think just here and now, think longer term. And I think your airplane example is a perfect way to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. What has been your best moment as a portfolio manager, as an investment advisor? What's been your best career moment?
A lot of people want to say it's when you get an award or, possibly, when you're sitting on national television and doing those, that would be kind of your shining moment. I will tell you, and I hate to actually say this because people are going to go, that sounds really corny, but it's true. If you knew me, this is going to be a true answer. I spoke earlier about how I take it very personally that people entrust me to manage their money. So my favorite moments as a portfolio manager, as a chief market strategist, is when I actually sit down with clients on the other side of my desk or on a Zoom meeting or wherever it may be, and they talk to me and they say, thank you so much for helping us reach these goals. This is what we needed to do. We feel like you have this under control. When a client says, I can sleep at night knowing that you're doing this, to me, that is the ultimate thing that they can say to me. It's the best compliment I could ever receive, because I don't sleep at night on a lot of nights because I'm so worried about things that are going on, but that's my job. And if I can make a client more comfortable with how their investments are and make them feel safe in their future finances, to me, that's the most important thing.
Love that. Thank you. You mentioned briefly your television work. For our listeners who are not aware, you provide marketing insights on CNBC, Bloomberg, and a host of other media outlets. What is the thing that best prepared you for being in front of the camera?
Oh, I'm not sure there's anything that really prepared me for it. I started this probably 2.5 years ago, I guess, was kind of the first time that I was thrown in front of a camera, and I was like a baby deer in the headlights. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think back to when I was a kid, and I was always involved in the arts. So I was a pianist and I was a dancer, so I always had recitals, things like that going on. So being in front of people never made me nervous. I shouldn't say it didn't make me nervous. It never made me nervous to like the point of paralysis where I couldn't do it. You always have nerves, and nerves is a good thing. I mean, I had nerves before coming on here and doing this with you. So it's just part of doing the whole speaking in front of people. But I think having a childhood where I was constantly put in front of people, whether it was for arts performances or at church, speaking in front of people or singing in a choir, whatever it was, it led me to not be quite so paralyzed with fear to be able to do that speaking. But I will tell you, just to give a little kind of funny anecdote, after I did my very first interview, it was on Fox Business. It was an early morning show, like I said, scared to death. I'm sitting there. I finished the interview. I'm just like, ooh, okay, I made it through. I didn't make a complete fool of myself. So, to me, that was a big win. And the team that I was working with that had prepped me a little bit on how interviews go, they said, okay, you need to go back and you need to watch it with your daughter. And I have a teenage daughter. She's 17, and she has done a lot of training on interviews. So they said, sit down with her and see what she says. And she tore me apart. I mean, you did this wrong, that wrong, listen to your voice there, that wasn't good. And I mean, I was almost in tears by the end of it. And so I got back with my team and I said, these are all the critiques that she gave me. And they said, man, she is spot on. She is your new coach. And I thought, do you know the power you have just given my 17-year-old daughter for her to tell me what I'm doing wrong? Like, I'm not happy about this at all. but there's a lot of little nuances and things that go into doing those. And so having some people on my team to help me with that was a huge benefit.
You said she mentioned something about what your voice was doing. Was she talking about vocal fry, or what was the issue?
So there are certain tones that you're supposed to use in your voice and inclinations in your voice at certain times of your answers, when you go up and when you go down, and all of these different things that I had no idea you're supposed to have in the back of your mind as you're answering questions. So those are some of the things, the little nuances that they try to help you with.
Have you ever read The Charisma Myth by Olivia Caban?
I have not.
It's a really good book. We can talk about it offline afterwards. The thing you said about inflection reminded me of that book.
Yeah.
What's the best thing about being on TV?
If you ask anyone, probably especially my children, I am not short on opinions on things. And so I think that being able to go on a platform that is all about finance and really allows me to help people in that manner, to give them my thoughts. Now, look, I am one person out of 1,000 that's on there doing interviews, and my opinions may match someone else's or they may not. But I always think it's important to have different opinions in your life on anything that you're thinking about doing. So to be able to give a voice to someone and say, think about this, don't just listen to one person, but have some different ideas. To me, that's really powerful. And I think that's my favorite part about being able to be on television and do those interviews.
And what's the worst thing? Other than your 17-year-old daughter having all this power over you now?
Other than that, it's actually easy. The worst thing is you sit down there, and for people that don't know, most of the interviews I do are remote. So I go to a studio in downtown Houston, and I sit in a chair with a set behind me, and it's just me and a camera guy, and I'm staring into like the black circle of the camera. And I have no idea what questions are coming at me. I mean, they don't tell you ahead of time what you're going to talk about or what the questions are going to be. So you're just doing a little prayer as you sit there that it's going to be something you can actually speak about. And the scariest part is you have no idea what the people on the other end of the conversation are thinking. I don't see body language. I don't know if they have this look on their face like, is she out of her mind? Or they're nodding and saying, yes, we agree with her. I mean, it's very hard to have a conversation with someone when you can't see them and you don't know what their body language is. So to me, that's the scariest part of it all.
I can see how that would make people hesitant. I'm a little curious as to why they don't give you some sense of what the conversation is going to look like. It seems like that would improve the quality of the interview, but maybe I'm crazy.
I mean, I completely agree with you. And, maybe we can start a petition of some sort, but, and it changes all the time. There will be, I do some of the Asian shows as well, and they're a little bit better at giving you broad topics, like we're going to talk about whatever happened in the market today. Okay, great. Well, that narrows it down, right? I mean, that could be 100 different things, but at least you can pick a few things to talk about. I know my very first interview, that one I was telling you about that I did on Fox, we were sitting there, and it's when Bitcoin was all the rage, and I knew nothing of Bitcoin because we don't invest in Bitcoin. We had no interest in Bitcoin. And we're sitting there, and I thought I was going to talk about general market stuff. And, right out of the box, here they come and go, give us your outlook on Bitcoin. I mean, literally, if I could have just frozen in time, that would have been the moment. It scared me half to death. I'm like, okay, great. Let me just try to come up with some answer that makes sense here. But it would be helpful to have a little bit of information ahead of time. You just have to kind of have in your mind some general thoughts and play off of those the best you can.
It's funny you mentioned Bitcoin. I am a big believer in crypto assets. We do our investing through Schwab for whatever that's worth. Like our account is with Schwab, and you can't buy Bitcoin on any of Schwab's interfaces. So, but there are a couple of trusts that you can purchase into that are playing in the crypto space or the Bitcoin space. So that's as close as I can get. But yeah, I think that space is fascinating, and I'm really interested to see where it goes, especially long term. I don't know if the next 5 years are going to be really a whole lot different for that space, but 25 years, you might see some real movement there. So
I think you'll probably see more movement after COVID-19. I think there's going to be so many things that shift in the day-to-day lives of people. And, currency is going to be one of those. So as before, when I might have been a little more leery of something along the lines of Bitcoin, I can see where there's probably a stronger future in it now than I would have a year ago.
Well, and to get into a little bit of investment esoterica, I was sort of expecting Bitcoin to be a little contrarian, sort of like a negative beta investment. And at least from the movement we've seen in this trust we've invested in, that has not been the case. It's moved with the market, and it's been kind of a high beta play,
Yep.
which surprised me. I was wrong about that.
Well, and I think a lot of people were. A lot of people expected it to be contrarian. And I mean, you just never know. Depending on how sentiment shifts in the market, things can change on a dime.
Right. I was, my take on it, this time last year would have been, well, Bitcoin is just like, Bitcoin is 2019 gold. Not the case for anyone who's wondering. Your work with local nonprofits is just as impressive as your career experience. Can you briefly tell our listeners about the work you do in that space and the literacy efforts organized by your daughter?
Sure. So I've always felt like it was important, to give back to the community. A lot of people do and find different ways to do that. So many things kind of focused around what my children were doing. My son, who, hallelujah, graduates from college in 2 days.
Congrats.
Still, it's graduating.
Yeah.
He was a competitive swimmer for most of his childhood. So I was really involved with USA Swimming and doing things for nonprofits in the swimming world, and really helping people maybe that couldn't afford to get swimming lessons and safety lessons and things like that on swimming. So I did that for quite a while. And then actually I served with National Charity League, which anyone who's listening, any mothers that have daughters out there, it is a fabulous organization. They have chapters all around the country, and it's a mother-daughter volunteer organization. Once your daughter hits 7th grade, they can enter this organization, and it goes all the way through their senior year in high school. And it's just, look, when kids are in middle school and high school, especially girls, there's a lot of peer pressure and things going on. So this is a time when you as a parent can spend really quality time with your daughter, but yet give back to the community at the same time. So that's an organization that I've worked with quite a bit. And then you spoke about the literacy efforts of my daughter. So she did start her own 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's called Literacy Strong. And so I will throw a plug in real quick. You can go to literacystrong.com to kind of read about what she does. But a lot of it came from the fact that her father immigrated from Cuba when he was about 10 years old and did not speak a word of English and got thrown into school. And what they did for him is, I mean, I don't know if people still use Hooked on Phonics or not, but I mean, that was big, like back in the day.
Yeah.
They put a 10-year-old, which is like 4th grade, in the back of the room with a tape player and like big old headphones on. And he had to like sit there and repeat Hooked on Phonics in the back of the room to try to learn English. I mean, it was the best thing they had at that time to help him. And so just kind of hearing his stories and what he went through, my daughter started doing some research, and she found out that literacy is not just about reading and writing. It's learning how to communicate on a personal level and a professional level, and how it affects not just your educational level, but it affects your socioeconomic status. It affects your health. It affects your professional life. There's all different things that literacy goes into, and it really starts as a family when children are young. If you look at graduation rates of children whose parents took time to read to them each night, it is 4 times higher than children that did not have that. So there's a lot of effort that goes into helping literacy for both children and their parents. And she developed 5 workouts. You just pick a workout each night of the week, spend 20 minutes doing it, and it helps improve literacy. And she works with local school organizations to give them kind of bags full of the different things that help with these workouts to go along with their reading curriculum. She's worked with Barbara Bush Foundation. So it's a great organization to work with. I highly recommend anyone getting involved in literacy to check out the website.
Fantastic stuff, and thank you for sharing the site. We'll ask for more plugs momentarily, but one more free flow question. Having earned your MBA and your CFA, how would you distinguish between sort of the benefits of each, but especially of the two combined?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different in and of themselves, but they do overlap to an extent. So, I mean, you look at an MBA, one of the things I loved the best about my experience at Mays was going into the classroom and sitting there with 40 other, professionals and going through a classroom with a professor and doing the work and having my group, go team 3 to work on projects and things together where you're looking at things from a very broad perspective. You're looking at marketing, you're looking at negotiating, you're looking at logistics, along with accounting and statistics. So there's a broad umbrella when you're looking at your MBA. And then going from that into my CFA, it was very lonely going into my CFA, just me and my books. Once a week having an online class once a week to hear the professor go over stuff, but you're focused so much more on the intricacies and the math and the formulas of getting down into portfolio management, where a broad look at portfolio management, but not a broad look at the industry in general compared to what you would see for business on an MBA. You do get into ethics, but again, related to portfolio management, we get into accounting standards and things. I can't tell you how many times I went back to my notes from Dr. McAnally, from Dr. Shetty, from my MBA work to help me figure out stuff on the CFA side. So putting the things together, putting the MBA and the CFA together, I think it just allows someone to have that 10,000 foot view of what's going on in industry and the markets, but still allowing you to kind of dig up from the bottom and get in the details and the weeds to do the work that you need to do as a portfolio manager. So I would highly recommend someone doing their MBA first and then going into their CFA. I think it's great foundational work.
Outstanding. Rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
I'm not sure I would say it was a failure, but I think when my whole plan of going to medical school kind of fell apart and I didn't know what I was going to do, I picked up the pieces. I got a temporary job, like I said, that turned into an 18-year profession at one firm before I moved over to Crossmark. Just kind of taught me that you may have a plan, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. There's something better waiting for you on the other side.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
I think people misconstrue kindness and compassion for weakness. I think people underestimate me many times because I do try to be very social and very compassionate to people when I meet them and, be very politically correct in what I do. But that doesn't mean that I'm not strong and fierce in what I do. So, they can underestimate me. That's okay. That'll work out in my favor in the end.
Yeah, I believe you. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
I think I'd have to say former PepsiCo CEO Indra Nooyi. The woman fascinates me. Not only did she lead this huge corporation, but you look at her history. I mean, she was in a girl rock band. She was named like top 3 moms of the year for a couple years in a row, along with in the top 2 for businesswoman of the year. She was athletic. She played cricket. She did all sorts of really cool stuff. And when you look at people and say, how can I have it all, family and business? She would be someone I'd like to sit down and talk with.
That's a great choice. Definitely an answer we haven't heard before. I like that. What is the most important advice you would give to yourself exactly 5 years ago?
Ooh, so 5 years ago, I was in the middle of my MBA program. I think I would say, don't let an opportunity pass you by. There are many times when I look back over my life, even moving from my previous firm, Fayez Sarofim, here to Crossmark, it all happened because someone asked my opinion and said, can I have a 10-minute phone call just to ask you a question? And it developed into a whole different life for me. So a lot of times we think we're too busy to do small things, but small opportunities can change your life. Don't let an opportunity pass you by.
What is the book you've given most often as a gift?
Yeah, I actually have given our executive team here at Crossmark a book called The Energy Bus, which probably quite a few people know about, but it's a quick read. I highly recommend it to everyone. And it's all about knowing where your bus is going, who's driving that bus, and having positive energy on your bus. You don't have what they call energy vampires on your bus. And it's a great read. I highly recommend it, The Energy Bus.
Kyle accuses me of being an energy vampire sometimes. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it say?
I think it would have to be probably one of my favorite quotes, and it comes from Marilyn Monroe. And it says, if you give a girl the right shoes, she can conquer the world. And I look at that as, give me the opportunities and I will make something happen. And I think that applies to everyone, not just girls. That just happens to be the quote. But I think that's what my billboard would say. Can I ask what shoes you have on right now? You can. And I actually have on a pair of black flats because no one's in the office except me. And so normally I would say I have on my heels and I'm in my work clothes. But yeah, you got me today. I'm wearing my comfy black. So, nice. I've got the power. I can walk. I'm comfortable. I'm ready to go. Bravo. Gig 'em. What is your fondest memory of TAMU? It has got to be, well, I was going to say it's got to be the people that I had in my class. I loved them tremendously. But actually, if I think back, when we had our ceremony, kind of not the graduation at College Station, but when we had our own ceremony in Houston, one of my dear friends, Shelly, and I did a rap to honor Dr. McAnally. She was our person that we chose. And we did the song from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but we changed the words to it. And the funny thing was that Dr. McAnally didn't know about the show. She had no idea what we were doing. And she looked so confused as to why everyone was laughing at this rap that these two girls are doing up there. So I look back at, wonderful times, but that one sticks in my mind as probably my most fun time. I would pay money for video footage of that. I bet it's somewhere. I'm pretty sure Julie could get that for you. Sounds good. We'll talk offline. Anyone you would like to send good bull? It's got to be my team 3 from my EMBA class. Best group of people that I have ever had the opportunity to sit with. They're wonderful. We're all in touch today. I love them. Sounds great. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I wanted to talk about just your thoughts on the market in general. Victoria shared a lot of hers. How has your focus shifted in kind of your firm's investment strategies? What are you watching now? What were you watching before? What do you think you'll be watching a year from now? Just any thoughts you have.
I think the market is still overvalued. It wasn't overvalued 2 months ago, but it wasn't a ton undervalued either. And I don't think the market has factored in all of the economic damage. If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said, this is where the market is right now is kind of insane. With the vaccine news, hard to say. I mean, at some level, nobody knows nothing. But I do think that there is some, to quote Robert Schiller, there is still some irrational exuberance out there. And the counter to that is that in the long term, the market always makes money.
Right.
The market never stays down for more than a couple of years at a time. And so, maybe I'll end up being wrong about that.
But historically, I think it's a good point. Historically, even from the highest points, so even from pre-COVID, the market typically goes up over the long term.
Yeah.
So we see these crazy dips, we see these crazy highs, but even over time, it outperforms the crazy highs.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah.
So,
and if I were to say what is a potential, we talked with the word bubble got used on the show, and if I were to say what is the bubble right now? Is there a potential bubble right now? And to me, the only one remaining, if the vaccine is real, which it seems like it is the economic damage. is all of the stuff that we've lost that connects other businesses to each other, and figuring out what happened with supply chain, that sort of thing.
And how quickly we can recover. Because like Victoria said, and I thought it was a really good point, this is a very specific thing causing the downturn that has the potential to go away. We don't know when, we don't know how exactly, but it has the potential to go away, like with a vaccine. And then how will the market recover? You know, it's interesting because there are a lot of people who are ready to go back immediately to the way that things were pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of people who are not. And it will be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out and what people really do. What do you think so you said you think the market is overvalued right now. What do you think will cause the market to correct? Is it earnings that are coming out in a month or so? Is it just waiting and people seeing what the actual damage is? What do you think is the factor that people are waiting for, or the market's waiting for to correct?
Always hard to say. It could be something like that, something that's, related back to COVID in some way. I feel like that's probably the most likely single possibility, but I don't think that's better than 50-50. I think there are a whole host of other things that are kind of unknowable at this point. And if you added up all those possibilities, it's probably more likely that it's going to be one of those. So it's not a really interesting answer to say it's something that we kind of can't know right now. But if you had said, at the beginning of this year, what is the thing that's going to cause the market to take its next dip? Nobody would have guessed SARS coronavirus. So
sure,
it'll be something else. 2018, there was a big dip. 2015, I believe, there was an energy related dip. And it's, what sets these things off is always something unexpected. But so I'll just go back to, I do think that we are still due for the market always overreacts. It's a series of overreactions, and I think there is another one coming at some point.
But you think it's unrelated to COVID, or you think it is related to COVID?
Well,
or you're not sure either way.
You're talking about the next.
Would you have been predicting? Because you said 2 months ago you didn't think the market was overvalued.
No.
So
2 months ago in March, when we had taken the big dip, and then in the recovery, we've gone back to we were
got it.
The market, I think, at that point was less valued than it has been historically, but was probably appropriately valued. And now with another kick of 25% that we're up since then,
yes.
We're now again overvalued, in my opinion.
That's good clarity for our listeners. Also, 2 months is very relative because this will come out at a different time. So
true.
You were referring specifically to
mid-March.
Mid-March, when we first kind of got signs that COVID was going to have a significant impact here in the US, versus now that we've had some recovery.
Yeah, and I think it was probably the market trough, I believe, was March 20th or 21st. And as of recording, we're recording this on May 18th. So
great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about the enemy in all of this, because it struck me when Victoria was talking about the financial crisis in 2008 that we very quickly found a culprit, mortgage-backed securities, the mortgage crisis, and we were able to say that is why the market crashed. And here's the insidious people who did these terrible things to cause the market to crash. There's a documentary from, I think it is MSNBC that did it. It was called The House of Cards, which was a bad name because right after that, the Netflix House of Cards came out. So it was very confusing for people. But at the time, it was the only House of Cards. And it was talking about how the reference was that the mortgage market was a house of cards that was ready to crumble. Mm-hmm. But it's a really good documentary if you ever want to know about the mortgage-backed security crisis. And I would show it or show clips of it to my students. And there were all of these people that they would talk about all these characters. I forget what one of the guys' name was, Lou something, and he wore this Hawaiian shirt and he was just obnoxious and he sold these bad mortgages, or he made these bad loans and then sold these bad mortgages. And you just had a really clear enemy, right or wrong, because I don't think that when I said insidious people, I was saying that ironically, because a lot of the people were maybe caught up in greed or maybe didn't understand exactly what was going on or whatever it was. But now the enemy is so different because it is this virus. And yet we've kind of tried to create some enemies, or the collective we, I'm not trying to create any enemies, but the collective we have created some enemies with, this governor or this president or this leader won't let us reopen, or whatever it is that is causing the downturn in the market. It's just really interesting how we need that kind of trope of someone to blame or something to blame.
Right. And sometimes it's a politician, sometimes it's a business leader that people are saying, oh, this person just wants to get rich in the time of a public health crisis. Not to name any
Bill
names,
Gates?
but Jeff Bezos.
No, let's name the name.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Bill Gates, right, is one that seems to be just getting hammered.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear Bezos more often. But people are saying there was this ridiculous story about how he's on pace to be a trillionaire by 2026. His net worth is like 144 billion right now. And if Amazon keeps growing at the same rate that it did for this past year, for the next 6 years. So if we had basically 6 more years of public health scares exactly like this one, then yes, Jeff Bezos would be a trillionaire. Stop being ridiculous. But I do agree that it's a little unfortunate that, and despite Jeff Bezos' extensive history of donation to a variety of different causes, it is a little bit sad to me that some of us as humans are sent to billionaires and some of us starve to death. That's a tough one for me. And the politicization of the whole situation is difficult too.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, the fact that Jeff Bezos does not need to be a billionaire, let alone a trillionaire, but he did create something that you and I didn't. And Bill Gates is the one I hear that keeps getting a bad rap because there's a lot of conspiracy theories around Bill Gates. I haven't read any of them, so I don't want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but something about he's pushing vaccines. And so, of course, he started the virus to get rich off of the vaccines or something like that, which I'm like, he's one of the greatest philanthropists of our time. And he doesn't need the money from a vaccine. But I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting that people do want to lash out in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Was he wrapped up in the pandemic stuff?
It's all, I don't know. I don't want to.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. That was good. The last takeaway, Victoria talked about filming in a studio in downtown Houston. And I don't know how much of this story I've told on the show before. I know I've told some of it, but my sister went viral when her son was born because her husband had filmed her going into labor on a GoPro camera and he kept filming the whole way to the hospital. And she had the baby in front of the hospital. And so it was a slow news day over the 4th of July weekend. This was in 2014, and she was on every major news channel. So I went down to see her and the baby and her husband and her other kids, and she was going to be on the news that day. And they took her in a limo down to downtown Houston to the recording studio, and I went with her. And it was so crazy. It was such a crazy experience. So we were in downtown Houston at the recording studio, and there was a green screen or something behind them, and it was staged like to look kind of like an office. And then there were lots of lights, and it was just a small like trailer almost in the middle of downtown Houston. And we went in and then got swept away in a town car. And it was such a strange experience. But hearing Victoria say that about going downtown to a little studio. I think they contract out to all the different networks, but they use this little trailer studio for it, and it's all remote. It was really interesting.
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience there.
It was a funny experience. I don't know if it was good or not, but memorable.
Yeah.
You want to close this out with a quote? I
would love to do that. From Shannon's favorite athlete, Michael Jordan, who's obviously had a very easy life.
Hey, now you didn't watch the documentary.
No,
yet.
that's what I'm saying. That was the joke. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe it was easy when it wasn't. Maybe I made you think my highlights started at the free throw line and not in the gym. Maybe I made you think that every shot I took was a game winner, that my game was built on flash and not fire. Maybe it's my fault that you didn't see that failure gave me strength, that my pain was my motivation. Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life. Maybe I destroyed the game. Or maybe you're just making excuses. Michael Jordan.
Dang, Jordan. Have you watched the documentary yet?
No.
Whatever.
I'll watch it after all the fervor dies down. Furor. I don't know. But yeah, I'm tired of seeing it on ESPN.com. I'm tired of every story being, here's what this analyst thinks about The Last Dance. Once ESPN stops jamming it into my face every 20 minutes, then I'll watch it.
I have a question for you. Why are you on ESPN.com right now? There are no sports going on.
Because habit, because that's where I go. Because
I'm like, wait, where are you seeing the commentary about The Last Dance? I've seen nothing, but I'm not watching ESPN or going on the website because there are no sports, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for some different kind of commentary. Like I would love to see a dive into history. Like and I mean, if we've got a vaccine now, like it really does change everything. But up until this point, I would really have enjoyed seeing, ESPN dive into, the greatest Super Bowls, somebody did write an article about the best World Series, but just count down the greatest baseball players ever, count down the greatest football players ever. Just start jamming some history in here. And
the greatest basketball players ever.
They did do that one.
Oh, wait, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, they did do that one.
That's the documentary.
Well, it's not.
Watch it.
It's not.
What you're asking for is out there, Ben.
No, but this is different. That documentary is not just the greatest basketball players ever. It's Michael Jordan's "I'm Still the Greatest" agenda, and yes, he is still the greatest. But I don't need to hear it for the 45th time.
I don't know. You might need to hear it.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.